There we
I'm
go.
going to step be back for time.
Hi, Megan.
Hi.
Okay, everyone, it's at 10 o'clock. I guess we can get started. I've turned the recording on. We found out earlier, Brandy had thought that she was able to record the breakout sessions, but from yesterday, and that didn't actually happen. So that's why I'm recording, making sure that people that weren't able to make the session can access this if they wanted to. Looks like we still got some people joining. Hang on, let me check. Oh gosh, there's a lot of people on this one. Let's see. Anybody else that looks like they're in the process of joining? Okay, right. So just first off, I just want to say thank you all for joining. Digby is an awesome tool that can really support a lot of different functions and projects at the libraries. We've got John McCullough from OCLC is here to answer questions, share information if you all had any questions about other stuff in Digby. I did want to just go ahead and say that there were some things that I did not touch on during the lightning talk, and I wanted to go ahead and touch base on that right now before I open the floor to questions that if John wanted to share anything. Looking to see if there was somebody else. Ashley Williams from the EKU is here. I had asked her for some feedback on using the Digby app. I've got her working on an inventory project and a part of our library, and I had asked her if she had any feedback. I don't know if she would like to jump in and share, if she would rather I did it. I'm going to give her a minute to, if she's able to. All right, well, she's still muted, so I don't know. She's doesn't want to speak up if she can't unmute herself. I'll just go ahead and share the one thing about using Digby. So especially if you're doing massive scanning projects like inventory, which is kind of the main thing we've been using at EKU, is I think she said the limit that it will let you scan is like 999 or something, like some 999 number. So when you've met that, I think you have to like send the report to yourself, and then you have to clear it out and start over again. That's an annoying thing if you're just like up there, you're just trying to scan, you just got stuff you got to scan. Another thing she noted was that it's been sometimes slow to send the reports. I don't know if that's a Digby issue, if that's a network issue, a device issue. Like those are like things that would be local to us, but that was just something that she had noted that, especially it seems like if it's some large reports, that sometimes they're, I think she said there's been times when she never got them. So she just had to make sure the next time she goes back into the Digby app to start the next session of scanning that she double check. Because that's what another thing about Digby that's nice is that it will maintain a list of what was scanned in the previous session, and then it gives you the option to clear that out so that you can start a new session. So you do have that option, but you just want to make sure that you've gotten that report before you actually clear that out, because once it's cleared out, it's gone. So I think that was kind of the biggest pain point for us. I mean, that's not a deal breaker, but that was just something that we've noticed. I know that John's probably taking notes about that, but that was kind of the big thing that I just wanted to share right now. And I can't think of any other big issues that we've had. One thing that you do want to know about is if you are using a generic device, like something that your library has purchased for use, like a library tablet, in order to email reports to yourself, that device has to have an account set up. And so you need to create like a generic work account and associate that with your generic work email. That at our EKU libraries, we have a generic e-resources email. So that's just what I set up on our devices. So that way it has something, because it has to have an email account in order to send an email from. So that's just some stuff to be aware of when you get something set up and you're using a generic device. There's something that you have to that you'll have to set up in order to fully utilize Digby. So that's just kind of some of the stuff that I wanted to throw out there, and I'll open the floor. I know that John was gonna share some stuff, so.
Yeah, so the limit on the inventory report is one that we've heard quite a lot, that folks would hate having to stop and ship it out and keep going, and that came up yesterday too. We'd certainly like to raise the limit, and we'll continue to do that. Digby as an app doesn't have a huge amount of storage compared to a desktop application. So it's really a technical limitation. We understand it's not ideal. And as with any limits, ideally it would be unlimited effectively, or as high as possible. But I think you can see that just sort of organically, kind of that ceiling will go up over time. Some of it has to do with the device as well.
Good to know.
And I have lots of questions about sort of future state things that folks, I'm curious if folks are interested in, but I don't want to dive into the futures in the first 5 minutes necessarily.
Well, I have a very basic question, not ever having seen this app in action. If you're using your phone and you're using a scanner, how does the scanner communicate with the phone?
By Bluetooth.
Bluetooth? Okay, thank you.
Yep, there's also some scanners that can plug directly into phones, but I think Bluetooth is a lot more common.
Okay, thank you.
That's the scanner that we use that's actually recommended on OCLC's FAQ for Digby. Is that, I think I put that in the chat. It's an Initech thing, and it's wireless. You just have to make sure you have Bluetooth enabled on whatever device you're using so they can communicate with each other.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for that as well. Like we had used, we had bought a mini iPad for the library, the student workers to use, or they were using their phones, and like it would drain the battery on a phone like pretty fast. But like I'm super stoked about the scanner. I think that'll save a lot of time, because it's just so awkward to like, because where our barcodes are is on the back. You have to open the back of the book, and it's inside, and so like trying to hold it open, scan the phone, you line the camera up, like I'm really excited about the scanner. I think hopefully it'll go a lot faster.
And one thing I noticed on Digby when I was testing it before this lightning talk is that it gives you the option to turn off the camera. I thought that was just like, it's just nice. It kind of condenses the view. And I don't know if it's doing anything to save battery life, but it's nice that it will, if you turn off that camera functionality because you just want to scan. I thought that was just a nice little feature that they've rolled out to it.
So they would still need to take I guess the iPad with them. They're just not and then that way the scanner's close to it to sync it or whatever.
They'd need the iPad at least in the stacks with them.
Okay.
John.
Yes, John.
Do you know with Digby, if you're using the camera on your device, when it captures the barcode, our barcodes on the book are in the first letter is a U, and it's in a uppercase. That U within WMS is a lowercase, and if it's an uppercase is what it's searching for, it comes back and goes, sorry, can't find it, even though it is truly there because it has to be lowercase. Will it translate the uppercase down to a lowercase? Because our barcode scanners at our desks, we have them set to automatically change it to the lowercase.
So can Digby sort of compensate for, you're sort of normalizing it a bit into the system, which is probably why it's lowercase or something like that?
Could be. I'm that's a piece that's beyond me.
Fair enough. So I don't know off the top of my head. I'd say the only thing to do would be to test it.
Yeah, I know it didn't.
Kind of thing. Sorry, say again?
It did. I know it when Digby first came out. It didn't do that. You had to manually go in and change it on each scan.
Oh,
I
really?
played around with it when it first came up. And I don't know how our stacks people are using it, so I don't really know if that has been fixed or not.
Yeah, I don't know either off the top of my head. It is certainly the kind of thing that we have been able to fix if there's like a consistent mapping that we do. And I imagine we're going to get into a lot more of this when we get into shelf reading, because now you're working with call numbers and there's a whole world of how to deal with the normalization there. So I think it's just beginning. At Digby, we have been able to sort of spot fix these kind of normalization disconnects. So if it's not working, it's the kind of thing that a support ticket could probably get remedied fairly quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Thanks. And it opens up kind of a can of worms. It's one of the things that I don't want to say dreading, but we just know it's going to be the price of getting into shelf reading, is suddenly you're wading into the waters of normalizing call numbers.
Yeah, Tyler will confirm. I occasionally ask questions that open up cans of worms.
Tyler Ferguson?
Oh, no, Tyler Goldberg.
Tyler Goldberg, okay. Great. I'm sort of curious if folks, how many folks here used to use the old B321 portable barcode readers for things like inventory? Is there any institutional memory around those? Because some of those functions were things that we were kind of emulating. I think those were the portable barcode readers that had a little bit of software on them. You could scan for things like inventory, but then you'd have to go back and sync them up to your ILS. So you're mostly shaking heads. Man, okay, I feel old now. That's good, that's fine. We'll look at the future. I do think shelf reading is the last piece of functionality, and maybe this is something I'm interested in feedback from the group on. First of all, as I mentioned yesterday, our path forward, our mobile strategy is really kind of two-fisted, where we are going to continue to have Digby as the staff-facing functions, and then anything that would involve a direct patron experience of the app is going to come in other solutions, starting with Capira. In terms of the staff applications, there feels like there's not a lot of functionality left that's needed. The possibilities that we know that folks might like us to bring in is, first of all, interlibrary loan pull lists. So having a Tapasa or other pull list to complement the holds pull lists, and then kind of support for weeding or pulling materials out of the collection, deaccessioning. I was curious if there's interest in either of those functions from the group.
I could see maybe the ability to withdraw might be useful. That I would be careful giving that power to people. You'd want to make sure that you don't have like a student worker that's like accidentally in the withdraw mode or something. But then you also wouldn't want to like be constantly putting a pop-up note. Are you sure you want to withdraw this every time they scan? You know what I mean? So I can see there would be a balance there. But that being able to do that, like that would have actually helped with that mold problem that we had, because we got to a point where like, whoa, this like the hairy book that I had, that screen image of them, that was really something that they found.
That was real?
Yeah, that was a real book on our staff. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's how bad it got. Yeah. So I could see how we might have wanted to have been able to just do that. We're gonna chuck this stuff. Let's just go ahead and scan them to withdraw. I could see how that might be. That could be useful for those kinds of projects.
Yeah, that was our thinking. I mean, it's functionally not hugely different from the capability we have to say, all right, all these books are going to a new location, so just scan, and it'll set them to that. The idea would be you sort of say everything I give you is going to be set to withdrawn, and you just work through it. The challenge is, I think a lot of folks want to have a predefined weeding list, right? So they want the students to, or whoever's doing the work, to go into the stacks, and not just everything I give you will be withdrawn, but everything I give you, if it's on this list, will be withdrawn. If I give you something that's not on this list, throw up a flag. And we don't have a terrific way of generating the weeding sort of list in the system right now and feeding it to Digby, which has kind of been what's holding us back.
Okay.
But the hope is whenever folks are doing that kind of batch pull project, that Digby can be involved.
Yeah.
And ILL pull lists we sort of see as a slam dunk, but because we have interlibrary loan that isn't WMS, that could conceivably be a different Digby-like app that isn't Digby, right? So you've got Digby being aligned with WMS, and then you would have sort of Tigby aligned with Tapasa and so forth. But the functionality, pull list functionality, would obviously be very similar. Our in-library research has indicated that in most libraries, unless they're quite small, they tended to have different student workers doing the ILL polls versus the kind of local holds polls. Wasn't sure where folks land on that, if at all. Or do you mainstream pulling things for ILL and local holds?
We at Center, we've just been doing using the holds. We had actually never done the holds before COVID. We're patrons, we just didn't have that functionality turned on until COVID, and then we started having to do that with curbside. But they have not been using the Digby app to do that. They've just been printing off the list, and then they take the papers and go find the books. But I could see how having it on your phone would be quite a bit easier. So.
Yeah, it's a little more user-friendly. I'll say candidly, I think for Digby, the big efficiencies come in things like inventory projects, where you have really high volume of individual item touches. That's where we see people really realizing the benefit. But once you've got student workers on it and they're comfortable with the app, it can be a nice way to do reshelving and the pull lists. Now, it's always been one of my, the pipe dream is everyone's on RFID, and then things like inventory are just waving a device at the stacks. But can we do a quick spot check on the status of RFID in our libraries? Anyone doing anything with RFID? Seeing a lot of shaking heads.
It's expensive.
That's pretty much what I expected.
It's the money. We don't have the budget.
Too expensive.
We want to do it, but
Yeah, we looked at it probably 5-10 years ago, and great idea, but it was beyond our financial capability.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, last I heard, it was still something like $0.10 a book for RFID, which that really adds up if you're doing an entire collection.
right.
It's probably why the only real RFID implementations that I've heard have been confined to specific sub-collections or special collections.
Yes, I was going to say special collections, yeah, right.
Yeah. I can't think of a library who's done their entire collection from top to bottom, which is too bad because Digby would really, come to life if we had, because the biggest barrier we have right now, I think, to usability and kind of going to come up in the shelf reading application is you got to consume that barcode, and it's almost never on the spine of the book. So it's always a pull out, zap, pull out, zap. If you're lucky, you don't have to pull it out and open it. But, shelf reading, when I used to do it manually, it's sort of cruising along the shelves, and now you've got like an individual touch, which, it would be nice to be more efficient, but there's nothing a system like that can do to consume the barcode otherwise.
I just want to jump in, just made me think of back when we had Voyager, which was an Ex Libris ProQuest product. They had a thing, I can't remember what it was called. It was like an inventory thing where you scan like whatever range you were going to do. You were going to shelf read or whatever inventory. You would scan the first book, and then you would scan the last book. And then the system, based on that, would tell you what's supposed to be within that, that range. And then you would go through on the thing, I think it was an app or something you could pull up on the iPad, and you would just like check that you found those things. I'm just throwing that out there. It was like it would like, based on the first book scan, that last book scan in that range or the shelf, it would pull, it would know what was supposed to be on that shelf, like shelved in shelf order. And it would tell you what was supposed to be there. And then the student worker would then manually check a box that they saw each book. And then whatever wasn't checked, you knew, okay, that's the missing book. We got to look into that. Just throwing it out there.
So the shelf reading function will try and do something similar where you will be able to define a call number range that you're looking at and start scanning through it. And it's essentially looking at your call numbers. It's filtering them based on the statuses, so it knows what's not supposed to be there. And you're essentially just trying to catch stuff that's out of order, right? So as you scan a record, Digby knows which book is supposed to be next, right? And so you scan the next book and it either says, yep, that's the one that I expected, or this is not the one. And it's either not the one because that book's misshelved, or it can be not the one because there's a gap and there's supposed to be another book in there. So those are the conditions that we try and throw out. And we're trying to strike a balance in the design. If the book is misshelved that you've scanned, but it's supposed to be reshelved in the range you're looking at, the student worker will be just reach up and put it up, because a lot of the reshelvings are pretty localized. You know, obviously have been carried across the library, but a lot of them are taken out, consulted, and just put back a few books down or a shelf up or something. We'd like the student worker doing the shelf reading to be able to address those ones right there. And then the things that are wildly out of order, we'll sort of assume, we're assuming they'll be put on a book truck and resolved in another way. So not identical to what you're describing with Voyager, but we're hopefully trying to fill the same function.
Cool.
John, on the shelf reading thing, can you make it so that it is searching just a particular collection? You know, I mean, because we have so many small collections within the library, so it would be nice if we could do that. And we have 2 storage systems, so it's nothing, you know, in WMS when you're searching, you know, when you're shelf listing and looking at all of those call numbers, they can be anywhere.
Right, and so I'm assuming your collections are identified as branches in the system, or?
Yes, except the robotic system, which is its own library.
That's its own library.
Yeah.
So we certainly don't give you call number ranges and ignore the fact that that's gonna be spread across locations. So the call number ranges will be restricted to this location you're working in.
Okay.
Okay,
It'll
now
be
would that be-
located at a shelving location. Will it be even more specific to shelving location too, within a branch?
I believe so. I can confirm that since we're still developing it.
I was gonna say,
Sounds like that would be ideal.
helpful, because within the Ekstrom Library location, we have a shelving, a book that's on the 4th floor shares call numbers of stuff that could be in the browsing collection, which is a shelving location, or our poetry room, which is a shelving location. Call number could be a 4th floor location if it wasn't in that particular location.
So the more granular filter would be a lot more useful, sounds like.
Yes.
Great, yeah, I'll take that back. I think that's great feedback.
And I think John might be talking about like multiple copies, because you might have or in our example at EKU, we have multiple copies where we might have one copy of our 4th floor book shelving location and then another copy down in our special collections archive.
That is
And
correct.
they're on the same record, but 2 different LHRs with the associated shelving location. That's an example where you'd want to be able to distinguish between the 2.
We do have some of that, but we also have a majority that are one copies that live in the shelving location, even though the call number could be the larger collection. So we have subsets within the larger collection, I guess is the best way to look at it.
Gotcha.
Right. And we're, you know, Digby's generally, since it's designed to work with the piece, it's operating at the barcoded item level, not the big
Okay.
level or something. So your multiple copies won't throw any sand in the gears.
What about temporary location? So like we put something on reserve, like it's in fourth floor books, and the fact says I want it for the spring semester 2021. So we'll put it in temporary shopping location or reserves location. Would Digby recognize that?
I'm pretty sure it recognizes temporary locations. Yeah,
Okay.
we did some special work around that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so like I say, my possible future list for Digby for the staff function, we want to get that shelf reading out the door, and then I imagine there'll be a lot of fine tuning, especially around the call numbers. There's a little inside baseball. There's kind of a big initiative at OCLC to develop a very strong call number sort that we can apply in lots of different areas. Digby would leverage that. There's a lot of need for it in analytics, for example, to do that kind of sorting in various ways. And it also drives that the newer shelf reading feature, shelf browsing feature that Discovery has introduced. And it means grappling with all the fun and games of normalizing call numbers, because sorting is easy. Dealing with all the normalization, and does a slash get collapsed to a space or to nothing? That's where in another system I worked with, there was only fewer than a dozen sorting rules, but there were something like 60 or 70 or 80 normalization rules. So we're fully wading into those waters, I think, with the shelf reading, but I think it's work well worth doing. But in terms of future stuff for Digby, after the shelf reading, we're looking at having Digby-like functions supporting ILL, because that's also physical materials managing. We've got the weeding and the renewals. And that's where we sort of see the end of the road. We could actually see a future where Digby is essentially done in terms of adding new features. I wondered what your blue sky thoughts were for ways that we could assist staff with the mobile application. Do the acquisitions people need it for receiving? Is there a function for a mobile app on not just check in, but when new materials are coming to the library at the loading dock, that kind of thing? Or do you guys think Digby is done and it works well and we can move on?
Speaking from the acquisition side, I don't know if at least with our workflow, I don't think Digby would be useful for that. Now, that said, I could see Digby being used in a transfer type project for us with a couple extra steps that it would be able to, if it could do. Because like right now, as we're going through our transfer project that we're working on, we are minimally changing the cataloging. Let me pull up a record so I can call it the right field. We're changing the call number type. So like most of ours came in as I think unknown, and we're changing that to Library of Congress, and we're changing the receipt status as we're transferring them from, say, where they used to live on the third floor to either one of our remote locations that we're doing it to.
Okay.
If you could, either verify that the two additional fields are set to the correct one, or change them to the correct one, that would probably make Digby useful on the technical services side. Because right now, we pull up the book and we have to touch each one of those fields through a mouse click, come down, select the field, but and it's just, it's maybe, 30 seconds a record, but that's 30 seconds a record. If you can do it in 2 seconds a record, you've now made it so we can do 6 more books a minute. So,
Right.
And we've got thousands of titles to move.
And is that a case where you would require the physical material in hand, or are you just working with the metadata?
We would be using, have the physical material in hand, because there's also some steps that we have to take on the piece itself to designate where it's going. So it would be a scan with Digby, make my changes, and then of course, I guess, once you reach the report limit, you could spit out the report to say, this is what I've done in this time frame. And as our
I would also like to mention something that John just tried to overlook, and that was normalizing the call number.
Yes.
That is an important part of what we are doing. And we hope that normalizing of the call number, because in migration, our call numbers came over in all sorts of different ways. And that had nothing to do with OCLC migration. It had to do with just the bizarre and interesting ways over the past, however many, probably 40 years, they had been, put into various systems. So, we hope that we are normalizing them in a way that will work for everything that OCLC wants to do in the future. But I think that makes it a more difficult process sometimes, because you're not really just changing location, you're really trying to fix that. So
yeah, I touched on what I viewed was the simpler pieces of that. And then we might be able to use the report of what we just did to go back and fix the other.
No, it's a great call out, and we like the possibility. We'd love to think there are some places in technical services, for example, that might help. Is there a place where it would be easier to go to the materials instead of having them come to the desk, for example? That's where you really benefit from the freedom of mobile. We also, sorry, go ahead.
Just as you were saying that, it popped in my head. The withdrawal feature, I could see if you were doing it on a piece-by-piece issue, if you had to do withdrawals on a piece-by-piece issue, that could be, it might be helpful on that too.
Okay. Yeah, the withdrawal weeding deaccession function is certainly something we're eyeballing. Unlike a lot of the features like holds pull lists, there weren't particularly robust extant mechanisms within WMS that Digby could just leverage, which is why it's taken a little longer. But I agree with you. I think there's an opportunity for a withdrawal function.
I would want to make sure that with that withdrawal function that we're able to share the report, like have a list of what was withdrawn for just if we needed it.
Yeah, with withdrawal, you're really going to want some sort of audit function after the fact, because you're going to be really worried about people getting it wrong, and then you're losing valuable parts of your collection if you can't catch it.
Right.
And also with us, we have so many copies in other, especially special collections. I mean, we just were copy happy for so many years that it has definitely been a problem. But I will say that, part of what this transfer project is doing is finally allowing us to look at these books, and we are looking at them one by one, and a lot of them are leaving the collection. But we didn't, weeding is a wonderful thing, but we were not allowed to weed until the last few years, and it has made for a mess, because the only thing that was important were counts, how many volumes we could have. That was more important to every previous dean as you tried to, get more and more numbers. And so finally, it is now a matter of we can finally get rid of the things that we should never have kept. So, things are being weeded one by one, but it's just, that's the way it's working right now.
And that's interesting. So this sort of weeding project sounds like it's ongoing. How are the candidates for weeding being identified? Is it based on physical condition, or are you you know, looking at the things with this old publication date and these few circs and going and pulling them?
Well, since I am the main weeder of the transfers, yes, physical condition is one main thing. I'm also sort of cranky about whether or not we have older editions. You're right. I do look at circulations for some things. And the other big thing is pre-24 that's already digital. They're going straight out the door. And I've only had one patron complaint that we had to rebuy. You know, basically, if I had, you know, in hindsight, if I could do this over again, because we were sort of trying to do this project in a hurry, I would have thrown out everything that we had in the stacks that was like pre-1940. I would just have tossed them. But we didn't, and I think we will be weeding our storage facilities for years to come at this point because of how much has been put into particularly the robotic system that should never have been put there. You know, one should be more, weeding has always been an important thing, but when you are forbidden from doing it, it does create some interesting problems down the road.
Right. And it's a real waste to see a robotic system turned into an archive. That's meant to be a service location, right? So,
Yes.
but it's easy to sort of shift it away. It's interesting you say everything pre-1940 would go. Would there be any subject area exceptions to that? I mean, obviously you don't want a 1939 medical textbook or something, at least not used as a medical textbook, but.
I tend to be generous to history and philosophy. This is our third floor. Our fourth floor, which is all literature, we have lots of things that predate 1940. But on the third floor, only really the subject areas that, you know, that age well. You know, one thing I've discovered, I don't think anybody's ever taken out a business book in this school. You know, I'm not sure why we have a business school, but certainly, you know, older things that are truly that don't date well. But yes, history and philosophy, I am not heaving out the door. But there are a lot of things, you know, I can tell because of, you know, how long I have been here. We started, the University of Louisville Library started with the gift collections of, I would say, 2 other libraries. And when we got them, the books were already old. And, you know, now they're really old. You know, it doesn't appear that many of them, you know, have even been used. So, you know, I wouldn't blanketly throw out everything, but I can tell in some cases, you know, I think it's up to a library to decide what kind of collection it is. I am not Harvard or Yale or, you know, these places that have endless storage and, you know, wonderful collections. That's not what we are. And, you know, eventually I think, you know, all sorts of libraries, and I know some in this state, struggle with the fact that, you know, they're never going to get a new building. They're not going to get lots and lots more stack space. And they, at some point, you know, administrations don't like to see anymore buildings that are just full of books that no one appears to be using. We actually removed 100,000 volumes from our third floor to make more student study space. And I think that is a valuable thing to do. And a lot of the stuff that came out of the stacks, you know, no one was actually using.
Right.
And ironically, we made that decision to clear that space pre-COVID. It was a desire of our student body and the campuses as general that we wanted more space in the library. And luckily, we had done that and had it basically together when COVID hit. And I think it has benefited the student body. So,
right. I think most of the libraries that I've visited in the past 10 years have all been following a similar track where they're trying to have a smaller footprint for the print collection, necessarily reducing the print collection in some cases. Sometimes they're compressing it, sometimes it's going to offsite storage, putting it into robots. But this idea of reclaiming the space for collaboration is common. And that was kind of, there were so many of these projects going on. That's why Digby implemented the sort of mass shifting function. That's why we think and hope there might be a role for it in weeding. But Tyler, to your point, there's a tremendous amount, the rubric of what is to be weeded is very, very complicated. And essentially WMS would need to build that before we could have a weeding execution function in it. So that's why I think this conversation about the criteria of weeding is very, very interesting. What stays and what goes. You have the usage overlays, you have the how much do we have a duty to just retain chemistry books because that's our thing. So it gets very complicated. I think it's a meaty area. I didn't want to hijack the Digby conversation talking about weeding, but I get very excited about it. Lori?
I just wanted to jump in. We've got 10.1. I just wanted to throw out another project idea I meant to mention at my lightning talk earlier, but you can use Digby for like for any like highly used collections where items might be lost, gone missing, patrons might steal books, like really popular books. Like if you know that you have specific collections where that's likely to happen, like for us, that's like our DVD collection. We still have DVDs, like our new books area. You can have your staff go out there, just inventory all the items and then review the report and compare it against what's supposed to be there. That's been helpful for us in making sure that, you know, again, the catalog is reflecting what you have. So you don't have to just do it for massive inventory projects. You can do it to kind of make sure that your highly used collections are accurate and up to date. Just wanted to throw that out there. One other thing I noted, and I just wanted to give a shout out to John. The checkout feature in Digby. I hope there's some circulation people here listening. Yeah, I thought that was really handy. I was actually testing this myself. It's really nice. You just scan the patron barcode, and then you scan the item that they're checking out, and then that's it. You can't get to the patron data information. So like, yeah, kind of if you're in WMS, you can actually access patron information and stuff. You can't do that in Digby. It just lets you check out the item, and then that's it. I thought that was just a really nice feature about Digby.
I'm really glad to hear that. We were curious about how the adoption was going to be at staff checkout, the staff checkout feature, because we're really hoping that you know, it does the majority cases really, really easy and lets the circ desk person do what they need to do, ideally without sharing a workstation if possible. Anyone else using that function right now in Digby?
We're not actually using it at EKU, but I've tested it, and we got some circulation here at EKU that we're going to be, hey, you guys want to try this out? This might be useful for you. But I just wanted to say I thought that was a very handy feature.
Okay, thanks.
I was actually just looking at my ID for U of L. I have an older one, so I'm not sure. But like my ID does not have, my library ID on my ID is not a barcode. So I'm not, I don't think it works. I don't think it would work here at U of L because there's not something that can be scanned for the patron.
Gotcha. Good point. Good point.
So if there's nothing to be scanned, would there be another medium we could ingest the patron ID?
Let me pull my ID back out.
Like, is it a chip or?
It's a magnetic strip in the back of the card.
Yeah, it's a magnetic strip. It does have a numerical representation on the ID, but it's relatively small print. And if you're getting older like me, it's hard to read even with your glasses sometimes.
So how are they being scanned at the circulation desk right now if they walk?
They've got small barcode readers attached to the side of the computer, and I think.
Well, they're not really barcode readers. They're little boxes with magnetic strips. You just It's like credit card, little credit card type.
Yeah, you just swipe it.
Yeah.
Well,
And I
which,
think, and I think they've moved it. As I've walked past our circulation desk, I think they've moved the card swipers to the other side of the plexiglass.
Yeah.
So the staff member or student worker doesn't have to handle the ID.
okay. Well, I'd say the fact that it's a swipe isn't a deal breaker because there are swipe add-ons you can plug into a phone. If you've bought beer on a flight back in the old days when we could get on airplanes, you've probably seen them. They do the little
Right.
Apple Store swipe. So I'd like to think that wouldn't be a barrier if, you know, if the value was there, that it was worth the library evaluating.
And it looks like we're getting ready to be forced close on the breakout
Yeah.
room.
It looks like we are. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
the conversation, guys. It's been very helpful for me.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.